Good evening and welcome to this public workshop of the Board of Education. I am Board President Robert Soakworth. Tonight, the board will hear an update on the school system's formulation of a new long-range facilities plan that will guide school construction over the upcoming decade. Information about the plan can be found at www.aacps.org/facilitiesplan. AACPS is accepting public comments on the plan at that site through June the 1st, 2025. This workshop is open to the public, but no public questions or comments will be taken. This workshop is being broadcast live on AACPS TV, which can be found on Channel 96 on Comcast and Astound, and Channel 36 on Verizon. High definition broadcasts can be seen on Channel 996 on Comcast, Channel 496 on Astound, and Channel 2136 on Verizon. The workshop can also be viewed live on AACPS's YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, and community members who are here and watching online. Today, we will present to you all our long-range facilities plan in this workshop. In this presentation, you will receive some of the findings, some of the data that has been presented through the consultant company. And then there will also be a timeline on how we will progress with this long-range plan. To take us through this presentation, we have Bill Heiser and Kyle Roof. They will take us through, and I'll pass it over to the two of you.
Good evening, President Silkworth, Vice President Dent, members of the board, and Dr. Bedell. I'm Bill Heiser, AACPS Chief Operating Officer, and I'm joined by
Kyle Ruff, Director of Facilities.
And we are providing a workshop tonight on the long-range facilities planning that is underway. During our presentation, like many of our presentations, we'll be using several acronyms. And so I'll pause here so that you can take a moment to review. The agenda for the workshop will be the following. First, we will review the background on long-range facilities planning in AACPS, followed by our 2025 goals. And next, we'll review the primary areas of study, funding issues, and variables. And finally, we'll review the schedule for long-range facilities planning. AACPS has had two very successful 10-year master plans dating back to 2005 and then again in 2015. These are often referred to as the MGT master plans. AACPS has retained Perkins Eastman as the consultant to help develop the 2025 plan, which will chart the course for school constructions for the next decade. This year's 2025 long-range facility study focuses on identifying facility needs, establishing recommended priorities, and serving to provide an objective decision-making tool. By way of background, on our 136 facilities, the average modified age is 30 years with over 14.7 square feet of building, over 3,000 acres of land with a current replacement value of $8.2 billion for almost 85,000 students. There are four primary goals for the long-range facilities plan. One is to update the 2015 Strategic Facilities Utilization Master Plan. Second, to provide a 10-year recommendation for facilities capital improvements and building utilization. Next is to provide and include transparent process for planning and to provide data-driven recommendations for the next 10 years from 2025 through 2035. The long-range facility plan is aligned to our strategic plan, priority 5 specifically, building and sustaining our future to ensure the safety, security, and upkeep of all district facilities and the efficient and equitable management and allocation of district resources. This long-range facility plan has had several long-term financial and educational impacts, as you know. First, it will ensure sustainable buildings for the future. Next, it will help us prioritize the major capital funding requests that we'll have, as well as the systemic renovations and maintenance projects. It will also help us determine any future location and needs for additions. Additionally, it helps us evaluate sufficient educational space in our buildings, specific also to help us through Blueprint. It will also help us project the utilization within our schools, and it'll help us determine any future land acquisition that we may need for new school sites.
The primary areas of study are focused on building utilization, sustainability, educational adequacy, age, and facility condition. During the summer of 2024, a team of third-party evaluators toured our facility to independently validate maintenance information and evaluate the educational adequacy of each building. In addition, the consultants were provided information on projected utilization, energy consumption, and modified building age data. The consultant reviewed state-rated capacity, current building utilization trend data, and enrollment projections to categorize buildings into 4 categories. These categories are similar to those used in both Phase 1 and Phase 2 redistricting efforts. Schools that have utilization under 70% are considered underutilized, while those over 100% are considered overutilized. Information presented on the web tool reflects current year enrollment data, as well as data from the 2024 Educational Facilities Master Plan for school year 2033 and 2034. As a long-range plan document, our focus is to determine future needs based on 10-year projected enrollment data. The top 10 highest utilized schools in 2033 are shown on the screen and reflect over-enrollment occurring primarily in Phase 2 schools and do not account for open seats in adjacent schools. To facilitate a broader view of capacity, a state funding score has been provided to account for student movement due to redistricting and adjacent school capacity. This score considers the capacity and future enrollment at nearby schools, as well as the home school, to better reflect state funding scenarios and impacts of redistricting. For instance, if your home school is over capacity, but adjacent schools have more open seats than needed, the state funding factor would be below 100% for your home school. As a reminder, AACPS will be presenting an update to the Educational Facilities Master Plan in June to this Board of Education for approval. This updated information will be used in the final report. Phase 2 redistricting will also impact out-year projections, and we envision updating the long-range planning data following the publication of the 2026 Educational Facilities Master Plan in June 2026. Building energy performance is crucial for the district's long-term success. It affects annual budgets and compliance with regulations. Schools were ranked by energy performance against EUI, or energy use intensity targets. Those in the top 35 scored excellent, while those below 101 scored poor. Note that these rankings are numerical order and do not reflect EUI scores. On the left of the screen are schools that scored low end of energy performance, while schools on the higher end of energy performance include those that have recently been replaced or renovated. By establishing energy use intensity targets and achieving LEED Silver status on our replacement projects, AACPS has been able to position itself as a leader in energy efficient school buildings throughout the state. Providing an environment that meets the needs of our students and staff is crucial for long-term success of the district. Following evaluations by our consultants last summer, AACPS conducted an internal survey that asked instructional staff members to rank the importance of educational adequacy subcategories. This resulted in a weighted criteria for an overall score. During the 23-day response period, we received over 2,200 responses to shape the final educational adequacy scoring. Using the weighted criteria determined by educational staff surveys, the following schools scored in the lowest in educational adequacy, with Old Mill North scoring poor, while the others on the screen scored fair. Modified age considers both original spaces and renovations throughout the building's life cycle. This helps us realize the benefits of prior renovation efforts while considering areas still original to the building. A prime example of this is Annapolis Elementary School. The original portion of the building was built in 1896. But underwent full renovations in 2014. Rather than using the original occupancy date of 1896 to determine age, the modified age accounts for the major renovation and addition project to give a modified age of approximately 11 years. For an overall district facility perspective, AACPS's average modified age is approximately 30 years. And we've held steady at that number for the past decade. We're slightly lower than the state average of 31. To provide another example of modified age, we'll use Rivera Beach Elementary School, which has an age or a category of poor. Originally built in 1957, it underwent major renovations in 1971 for a complete renovation project. In 2019, we built an addition on the school. With all that information, we have a modified age of approximately 48 years. So the 10 oldest modified age facilities are shown on the screen. Millersville Transportation is 98 years old. Maryland Hall is 86 respectively. The average age of the top 10 shown on the screen is 70 years old. Facility condition assessments were also conducted on building inventory during the 2024 summer. The focus was on structure, exterior enclosures, roofing, exterior stairs, conveyances, which are elevators, plumbing, fire protection, HVAC, electrical, and site improvements. Systems were evaluated on age and condition. If a system or systems at a facility were identified as reaching the end of their useful life, the capital renewal value of those systems were compared against the replacement value for the building. This comparison is known as the Facility Condition Index score. Buildings with an FCI below 10% were considered excellent, while those above 60% were considered deficient. Facilities with the highest or poorest rating for facility condition assessments are shown on the screen. Millersville Transportation at 64% is considered deficient, while Carver, Central Office, and Chesapeake are considered poor. The rest of the screen indicates fair ratings for those schools. Relatively speaking, if we consider a do-nothing scenario, in 2035, the number of deficient schools moves to 3, and the number of poor category schools moves up to 24. To make a viable plan, reliable, long-term funding is required from our partners. Major issues that we face include overall funding revenue predictability, increased regulatory environments, which include new and revised building codes, new and revised programming standards from the state, and new and revised sustainability or environmental requirements. In addition, the availability of qualified contractors and labor is important. Finally, increases in material pricing and disruptions to supply chains have a negative impact on our ability to complete work. The IAC and APA, the Association of Physical Plant Administrators, suggests that LEAs invest between 3.5% and 4% of the current replacement value on an annualized basis for capital renewal and operating programs. Currently, we are below those levels. AACPS needs an additional $45 million annually to reach the minimum 3.5% current replacement value threshold. These figures exclude any expansion of our footprint. New buildings and additions increase both near and long-term ownership costs. Therefore, it's crucial to optimize existing facilities and avoid unnecessary expansions for fiscal sustainability. Capital funding is divided into 4 main categories: county, IAC, alternative financing or funding, and reverted funds. As state and federal priorities shift, some capital programs are losing funding or ending. Some of those are noted on the screen. To sustain progress made over the last decade, more reliable funding sources are essential. At the May 7th Board of Education meeting, it was noted that the 6-year funding prospects shown in the county executive's budget are lower than requested by the Board of Education. Over the next 6 years, the capital funding for AACPS is anticipated to decrease from roughly $200 million annually to slightly over $33 million. Due to budget constraints, new projects in the 6-year plan were not considered this year. Optimistically, we believe that next fiscal year will provide us an opportunity to not only refine our long-term capital planning strategy, but provide a report that clearly defines our priorities for our capital budget to both our state partners, County Planning Advisory Board, County Executive, and County Council. An objective report and lobbying from members of the board will help focus our collective efforts and bring replacement or renovation projects to life. Along with county funding, we require IAC support for school renovations and replacements. Although Anne Arundel County received respectable funding this year from the state, it fell short of our $41.8 million request. Our FY26 IAC allocation is $31.8 million, with an additional $46 million coming from Built to Learn funding administered by the Maryland Stadium Authority. That funding is ending. Future funding will need to address both the loss of the BTL funding for AACPS. These contributions were essential for completing the Old Mill Master Plan and to keep pace with the cost of construction. Without significant alternative funding sources or adjustments to the IAC funding formulas, we cannot meet the district's capital renewal and school replacement needs. The time value of money is a crucial element in capital programming. $1 today does not equal $1 tomorrow. As previously noted, IAC funding has not kept pace with inflation. The blue line on the screen represents the increasing cost of school construction on a cost per square foot basis. These are IAC published data information. It is evident that construction costs have risen over 80% in the past decade. During the same period, annualized IAC funding has remained relatively stable. Adjusted for inflation, AACPS's annual IAC allocation should be closer to $74.3 million to match the purchasing power of 2015.
Here's a quick recap on the long-range study process. In December 2023, we advertised for a long-range study consultant, which the board approved, and it was Perkins Eastman in April 2024. From May to December, the consultant collected facility-related data. In March, AACPS teachers and staff were surveyed on the educational adequacy priorities. The web tool was released in April for community feedback. We will issue a final report at the end of August. There will be a presentation to the Board of Education in September. As a reminder, this is not an action item for the board to vote on, but it is informational only, and we'll present that later in the fall of 2025 to the County Council as well. Public engagement during this process has been centered around getting feedback to set the priority for ranking potential projects based on 5 focus areas: capacity of buildings, facility condition, energy efficiency, educational effectiveness, and building age. This information will be used to develop overall rankings for the projects. The AACPS community has been able to provide specific feedback on the web tool for specific schools. The web tool was formatted very similarly to the redistricting tool, and heat maps and other data will provide the district and school level information. Once again, we encourage input. We have a few weeks left, so we encourage everyone to be involved and make sure that they submit something through that web tool. As we enter into the summer and fall of 2025, the overall rankings will be data-driven, considering feedback, input, and the needs of our students and schools. As mentioned, we'll have a final report in August and a board presentation in early September. With the long-range plan coming to completion in September and the redistricting process continuing in the fall, it is extremely important for constituents to stay engaged as we communicate updates. And with that, Mr. Roof and I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. So we're going to go in roll call order this evening for questions. And first this evening is Ms. Tobin, Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. It's a lot to take in. And obviously concerning that we have gaps that we're going to have to address. I wanted to ask a question, and I don't know, Dr. Bedell, this may be more for you, but it was my understanding that we were going to focus intentionally on middle school facilities as we do this work. Is that part of this process?
So listen, let me see how, you put me on the spot.
Yeah.
All right. So yes, I think for me, this is why the feedback from everybody is very critical. You
Mhm.
saw on several slides where there were multiple middle schools
Yeah.
referenced. And so my thought process will be, as we continue to get more information in and we get all of our final data, I would mostly hope that it will steer us in the direction of meeting some of the needs of middle schools. I've been very verbal about what I have seen as I've gone in to visit middle schools across the county. And when we did our dry run, to see 3 or 4 of the middle schools up here, it looks like consistently, hopefully will lead us to begin to hopefully take some action over the next 10 years.
Thank you. And a couple of quick questions, just information that flew by me, and I'd like to make sure I actually have some of the correct numbers. Slide 22, where you talk about the APA level 2 funding. Could you say one time more the amount that would be required for ACPS to meet the minimum 3.5%?
We would need to allocate an additional $45 million,
Okay,
either through capital or operating.
okay. And similarly, slide 25, long-range funding, state funding. Could you go over one more time, what we got? I believe I didn't get the exact number we will currently get from BTL, but again, where we land on that.
So our request for FY26 was 41.8, and that was strictly for IAC funding.
Okay.
So this year we did a combination of IAC and Build to Learn. We want to absorb as much of that Build to Learn because it's specifically allocated to Anne Arundel County. So with the Old Mill High School, we were able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
IAC funding, or BTL funding rather, for that school was at $46 million.
Okay. So that was 46 million.
Yep. And what we're actually getting from the IAC is 31.8.
Okay. And so
So-
we have,
$10 million short.
we're 10 million short. Okay. All right. And I just want to double check. Okay, that concludes my questions for now. Thank you very much.
Ms. McDermott.
And I'm just going to stay on that same slide, slide 25. The build to learn is that you said that's rolled through MSA,
Correct.
and you said that's no more
Yes.
after this.
So we still have some residual, smaller amount
Okay.
left in projects that have been completed. So there's residual funding left over that we could potentially roll hopefully into the middle school project upcoming, but it's not a substantial amount.
And is that just kind of the trickle down of what's happening at the federal level?
So this was allocated in around 2019
Okay.
BTL funding. It was a separate line where MSA would go out, get bonds, rather than putting them on the state's bonds, they would go out and solicit bonds themselves. So it was an alternative revenue source.
Got it. Thank you.
Ms. Pullum?
Thank you so much for this briefing. It was very informative. I am going to hold my question to the next round. Thank you.
Ms. Schauheim?
Yes, thank you as always for a great presentation. I'm kind of in shock to see Glen Burnie High School mentioned nowhere in the facility condition, modified age, et cetera. I mean, that's been a topic of some for a hopeful consideration for either a replacement or a massive redo. Where do they fall in the scheme of all of this?
Give us one moment.
Yeah, of course.
We dig up some data.
While you're hunting, I'll just say from the time I got on the board and various members of that board and the previous board before that, there was an interest even back in those days of that school being thought of for capital improvement.
So Glen Burnie High School has a modified age of 52.8.
Okay. So not as old as some, but I think no one will argue with the thought that that building could use some love. So just throwing it out there. That was a nice way to put it. Going to, what did I see? The two middle schools in the Broadneck, they were listed on one of these. I've been through there as recently as this year. I mean, I haven't been to every corner of that building for sure, but it doesn't seem as rough as some of them. What was the criteria that plays a part in the determining the facility condition?
So facility condition is primarily focused on the systems themselves in the school. So it's both age and condition. So if a roof structure, a large building like that, it's closer to $10 million to replace a roof on that building, whereas other buildings may have had roof projects. Annapolis Middle School right now is undergoing a major roof project. So that score for a roof on Annapolis Middle School would be considered excellent, while Magathi Severn would be lower.
Got it. So all the things that most folks don't see that that are high ticket items that play a huge part in.
Yeah, I think aesthetically, building modified age would give you a better indication of what the educational environment kind of looks like. Both that and the educational adequacy are kind of reflective more of aesthetics and how the building actually functions. Whereas systems and how comfortable you feel or how impactful the building environment envelope would be more of the facility condition.
Got it. No, it's really, really helpful. I think that's all I have right now. I'm sad about the funding not keeping up with inflation. Hardly surprising. Seems to be the way, like, do more with less. It's just the kids kind of thought, where when these things are so important and impact thousands of children's lives and can tee them up for success. Like, I'm kind of this is not a commentary towards y'all or the school system, quite the contrary, but just the last kind of like the afterthought that we give to kids sometimes. This is reflected in slide 26. So yeah, it's sad. I hope that we can find another way, although with the stuff from the federal government coming online, I'm really seriously worried. I'm sure you all are as well.
I mean, I'll say this. I think here first of all, it's the generosity has been at really a high level. And my fear is exactly aligned with yours with this potential drop off. One of the things that I've been able to tout is how well our facilities have been managed and taken care of. And although we do have deferred maintenance, the deferred maintenance here pales in comparison to some other school districts where it's been decades of neglect and abuse. I don't want to see us fall into that path because of potential future trends. And Kyle said something that's important for everybody in here to hear, having a look at other funding sources. It's something that I know, Dawn, you and I talk a lot about in our short time together about philanthropy. It's something that I feel is not as strong here as it is in other places. I could sit here and think about a Sunderland Foundation that gives, $100 million grants out for people to do these type of capital projects. We don't have access to that type of philanthropy here. And I know it's something that we're going to have to figure out, because otherwise this gap, in my opinion, could be devastating, and it could really slow up the type of progress that we're making in this school district over a 10-year period if we don't keep up with inflation. So I just wanted to validate what you're saying.
Thank you. Actually, that made me think of something. I was looking at headlines today and I saw that Moody's has downgraded the U.S. in terms of its bond rating. I know that the bond rating in Maryland was just downgraded the other day. How does that play a part in does that have a trickle down effect to the cost of construction?
You want to answer that, or you
No,
want
you
me
can
to?
go ahead.
I mean, yes, it absolutely will, because anything that we do now from an interest rate standpoint, it's going to cost more to borrow money. When you get these downgrades, ultimately your borrowing power or your ability to be able to get things at a lower rate, well, all of that gets passed down to the consumer. So
Awesome.
you can absolutely see a potential spike. It works the same way. If you have excellent credit ratings, you're going to be able to go get you a house or a car at a much lower interest rate. Even though interest rates are high, that drops down and you fall into a different tier, then you're going to fall in a category where interest rates are going to be at a higher percentage.
So to that point, because Anne Arundel County has maintained AAA bond ratings, even though the state was just downgraded, does that help us at all?
It helps from a county bonding perspective.
Okay.
You're able to get more preferable rates with that higher bond rating. But as mentioned, we partner with multiple agencies. So even though the county has preferential ratings, the state doesn't. And then when our federal partners, like the Mead High School project, that's all financed as well, that could impact us.
Sorry to be so Debbie Downer, but here we are. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Ms. McFarland.
Thank you for this. So on slides 13 and 14, educational adequacy, can you explain a little bit more who was included in these 2,200 responses and whether you feel that it included a good range of the different schools and populations?
Yeah, I do think it included a very wide range of responses. Our target audience was really the folks in the classroom. So it was roughly 9,500 people that got the survey. We multiple times we sent it out again, asking them for their responses, trying to get as much input as we can, because we do feel it's valuable input to get boots on the ground information about what are the needs of the staff out there.
Thank you. That's all.
Ms. Hamdawi.
Thank you both. My brain hurts, which is a pretty good indicator that it was an in-depth presentation. I think at this point, most of my questions have been answered, but for slides 15 through 17, the modified age, I might have missed this, but could you please walk me through in a greater depth how exactly this is calculated? How does a renovation affect the age? How large does the renovation have to be? Is that based on dollar value, square footage? I'd appreciate some clarification in that regard.
Yeah, so it's really a weighted average based on when the addition modification was made to the building and how many square feet. And then we do divide that by overall square feet to get an age.
Okay, that was it. Thank you so much.
Ms. Dent.
Good afternoon. Thank you all both for a fantastic presentation and all the work that went into trying to weed through 2,200 comments. So thank you. I just want a clarification. I think I heard you say that right now that the funds is going to drop from 200 million down to $33 million. I just need a little bit of clarification and understanding.
That's the approved 6-year plan in the county executive's budget.
So what does that mean?
So each year is a new opportunity. I'll start with that.
That's a nice way.
It basically lays out a plan for the next 6 years on how the county executive envisions capital funding to be spent. Each year we get a new opportunity to reset the deck and kind of say, here are our priorities based off of what our funding level was the prior year and what we anticipate in the coming years. Usually the 2 consecutive years following the budget that's passed, for this year it's 27-28, we have better alignment with where we want to be. And then based on funding scenarios that play out, we get to redetermine where we need to be in the next couple years, if that makes sense.
Yeah, $170 million doesn't get cleared up in that, but
No, it does not.
I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate the work that you're doing, but I know that if it's possible, I know that we will be able to make the deficit up with you two at the table. My last question for you is that translation for me, after taking into all the energy, the facilities, everything in there, when we come back in, I think it's October, is that when your recommendation is going to be made to us to tell us what facilities that will be the priorities of facilities for renovation starting in 2026, or is it 2028?
So this report will help us frame the next capital improvement budget. So for FY 27.
27, 28.
Yeah, so in September, we'll provide the report, August, September timeframe, we'll provide the report. At that same time, we'll have capital budget workshops and presentations to the board for approval. And some of the projects that are currently on the CIP, including Ruth Parker Eason, completion of the old mill complex, those will continue to show up in the CIP and also be reflective in this plan.
Okay, and the last question I had is, I thought that Millersville Transportation was already on the list to be renovated. Is that?
It is.
Okay, all right,
Yep.
that's my last question.
Yep.
Thank you.
We have to find a place, huh?
We continue to work on that.
Okay. So, as always, we are being good listeners. And boy, when I hear 200 million to 33 million, is that what I heard? A 6-year plan from the county. So, I guess this is what I'm going to say. My district is District 2. We have a new 7-run high school, Old Mill Middle South, Old Mill Middle North being built, a new VOTEC center, and lots of other things across the county. So what I do know is I am very appreciative, and we all are, for our funding sources. And it's interesting that I think we probably do have to take a look at some additional funding sources, particularly the philanthropic ones. That would be really great. But I'm very appreciative of the funding that we have gotten, and it's almost for the past, 10 years, it's been over 200 million. And so now I'm hearing that within the next 6 years, it's going to go down to 33 million. My response is our role is to advocate for the needs of our students, our families, our communities, our schools. That is our role. We are not the funding source. I kind of find it hard to believe, but I mean, if this is a reality check, that we're going to go from 200 million to 33 million or less. But what that says to me, we as a board must continue to be the advocates for our kids. And advocacy at all levels is critical. We need to have communities, schools out there. We need everybody to make use of this public engagement and feedback, the portal, because that's going to make a huge difference. Everybody needs to stay engaged. And of course, we all know that we're in the midst of our phase 2 redistricting, and that's going to be completed in December. And I'm going to suggest that we will then be in a much better position because we will be making the best possible use of the seats that we have compared to what maybe, didn't happen in some years. We need to continue to advocate for the needs of our kids. And I think everybody on this board has a pretty good track record. And Dr. Burdell has a pretty good track record when it comes to advocacy and monies that we have received for our students. I've always said that the building certainly does not make a school great. It's the people that work within that building that make it great. However, having said that, Glen Burnie, thank you, Ms. Shahheim, for mentioning that. Absolutely. Glen Burnie there has to be some discussion about that. Now, we need to have the folks in those communities come out, show us by coming out and participating in this engagement, this portal. There are other concerns out there, and I'm not going to make a list of all of those, but there are some other concerns out there. So having said that, this was a great presentation. I appreciate your presentation. I'm going to be positive, though. I honestly, I just don't believe that the leadership in Arundel County or some of our other funding sources are going to let us go from 200 million to 33 million. I hope I'm wrong, but we will continue to advocate. And we certainly do need to continue to develop some additional funding sources that's only going to help us. So yes, Dr. Burdell.
I know we've mentioned Glen Burnie multiple times, and I know that in the budget, hopefully we'll get through county council, there is $250,000 earmarked to conduct a feasibility study, I believe, for Glen Burnie. So trust me, there's definitely a need to take a deeper look at that high school.
Thank you, Dr. Burdell. So what I'm going to do at this point in time, rather than go with the roll call, I'm going to go by lights. So anyone that has any questions, if you hit the lights, and you'll be recognized. Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. It occurred to me, I had a couple of other quick questions. So as we look at needs in the buildings, it was unfortunately clear to me when I first came on to this board and when my own child was a student in the system, that it was very often the case that the areas with highest poverty and so forth often had the oldest facilities. Just as I asked about redistricting and farms rates, for example, as one piece of consideration, is there room or is there an intention as we think through the data and the results that come, to also be cognizant of where we have particularly, for example, particularly high rates of poverty and all the other criteria that we know for Title I funding, for example, suggests that you want smaller class sizes, you want more space, you want those kinds of things. Is that something that can be discussed in this process?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's always an opportunity to take a holistic view. That it's not just about the objective numbers. That's an important part of this, is which we're providing. However, knowing the programs in the school, knowing where we want those programs to be, how it interjects or intertwines with utilization rates and redistricting, where we're headed there, it's all interconnected.
Yep.
And understanding the needs, as Mr. Roof indicated, the needs he referred to as boots in the ground, teachers and students and what they're feeling. We can't do everything.
Right.
You're not asking for everything. What you're asking for is a holistic view, which I
Yeah.
think is appropriate.
Which leads me to my second question, which is to ask a little more detail and clarification with regard to the educational adequacy surveys. Mr. Roof, I believe you mentioned that the result of the survey was developing weighted criteria. Can you say a little more about what those weighted criteria looked like?
Sure. So we had subcategory groups within the educational adequacy. Some of those were listed online. One in particular was not. Safety and security ranked the highest. And then following that was classroom space, environmental quality, organization of the building, how the front office and the classrooms are all organized in the building, assembly spaces, overall architectural presence of the building, and then the last two categories were extended learning and community spaces.
Okay, terrific. That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Ms. Pullum.
Okay, I'm ready now. Thank you so much. So starting off, you touched on something just a second ago, Dr. Heiser. You mentioned redistricting. And what I was looking at as we're going through this, first of all, I do want to really reach out to our community members, because most people are focused on redistricting and they're not focused on this survey. It could be the name, that it's facilities, not building, new buildings or something like that, but they're not catching on. And what I'm trying to explain to them is they both go hand in hand, and you just confirmed that. And so what I'm really looking at too is how, as we're going through the redistricting process, the numbers or the schools that you listed, I'm wondering, will that be the same after redistricting? And a few of those variables that you listed was utilization. So that won't, hopefully when the redistricting happens, that will no longer be an issue, or we level set. Then safety and security, hopefully when you're level setting that, there will be some different, there'll be maybe different outcomes. And then energy, because of the number of students in the room. And I was just wondering how, so maybe you say this isn't going to make that much of a difference, but in your mind, how, as we move forward with the level setting, are you taking that into consideration when you're drawing up these, when you provided these outcomes that you have so far?
Mr. Roof, if you want to take it, and then I'll add on.
So we'll start with building utilization.
Okay.
All right. So as noted on this slide, you have the top 10 schools in 2033 that are projected to be overutilized. One key aspect that we're looking at is the state funding factor, which takes into account the adjacent schools. So when we do that, the list on the right comes up as schools where we see a high population growth area, not only at the home school, but also the adjacent schools. So we're seeing a considerable lack of available seats in those buildings. And that will take into account both movement of students during the redistricting process, but with the understanding that we would again have to look at it in 2026 once we have a longer range plan to kind of level set.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That was very helpful. Two more questions, sorry. I noticed on your one chart, it talked about energy proficiency, and Crofton High School is a rather new school. And I was just wondering, out of curiosity, why you believe that might not be on your list in terms of highest energy performance schools?
So our larger schools have benefited from geothermal.
Okay.
Crofton was not one of the schools that has geothermal. So you can see Old Mill South, Severn Run doesn't have geothermal, but it's a tighter building. So we did a lot of building envelope commissioning as part of the Severn Run school project. And that really helped us tighten up that building envelope to get more energy efficient. So as energy standards progress, as we get tighter building envelopes and we really set targets for what we want to see during the design, we can get these buildings quite efficient.
Great. Thank you for that. And then lastly, Dr. Bedell, I just want to point on the topic that you mentioned. We can have a great strategic plan, but if we get too far behind in terms of capital project growth, it's going to be to a point where we're not going to be able to catch up. So whatever we need to do that, that's really important, because once you're that far behind, it's so hard to catch up and get ahead of the curve, whether it's philanthropy, working with different organizations. But I am really concerned about that, because once you drop that low in a budget, it's harder to get back that money. So, and I don't see that very often in budgets. So whatever we need to do, whatever that plan is, every list that you showed us had more than one. It would be different if we were in a situation where we were catching up, and we're not. We're on a trajectory and we're getting there, but we still have a lot to do. And that's my concern, is that we have a lot of modifications and new builds that we need. And that's not going to help with our long-term successful planning. Thank you.
The same concept applies to, I would say, the 6 years where the school district didn't get anything above maintenance of effort. And even though we have received historic and generous funding the last 4 or 5, trying to close that gap is an absolute nightmare. So you do not want to fall behind any further on what we need to do with the facilities. I can tell you these amenities that our kids have out here in Anne Arundel, it gives our students significant advantages over students who can't do, half of what our kids are able to do on our school property because of the support that we've had historically. So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's a little nerve-wracking to look at the outlook and to think about, where this could end up going. So I agree.
Yeah, and just to follow up, this also ties into the safety and security, Dr. Bedell, because you have this great plan. You're piloting some of these programs. And again, safety and security are top priority along with that building. So I'm hoping that there'll be, sometimes when one source dries up, there's another source. So being creative in how we get that funding, but that security issue is definitely something that we don't want to, we want to keep going and not have that stop due to financial funding. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any more lights. Any more lights, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, so Dr. Heiser, Mr. Roof, thank you so much. Great presentation. Dr. Bedell, any closing comments?
No, thank you. I mean, I just, again, appreciate what we're trying to do, the transparency that we want to insert into the community, and just making sure that we get as much feedback. While I don't have a whole bunch of control over what the final results are, I think I've been very clear about the need for us to have this focus on middle schools, and I've been very clear on that from day one. And I'm hoping that people will continue to weigh in. Because I even said earlier, there's a middle school. I don't even see why there's a middle school not named on this list today. I'm like, what the heck? But we need people input if we want these things to get done. So that's really my ask of our educators and folks in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. Ms. Pullum, would you like to?
Just going to add 14 days to fill this out. We have Memorial Day weekend coming up. So treat this like it's redistricting. It's just as important. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pullum. Okay, thank you once again, everyone. That concludes the workshop this evening. Have a great evening. Good night.